In 1982, Mattel revealed to the world a brand new toy line that was eventually going to become their best-selling boys' toy line of all time, outpacing even Barbie and Hot Wheels as far as raw dollars in the toy aisle. The line was called Masters of the Universe, and it introduced an entire world of fantasy play for boys, girls, and kids of all ages, a line that remains popular today and is still on shelf. And a lot of the popularity had to do with the simplistic design of the characters and the colors and accessories. In fact, almost every character, especially in the launch of the line, used a basic body with colorful armor and accessories. Mattel's strategy was to have three bodies: Beastly, Reptile, which was used for Skeletor, and Human for Man-at-Arms and He-Man. Between these three body types, tons and tons of original characters could be created, simply by switching out the accessories, recoloring, or even swapping around parts. Characters having parts of the beastly body, parts of the reptile body, and parts of the human body, like Zodak here. All you needed was new armor and a new head, and with so many shared parts that could be swapped around between the three body types, so many characters were possible. In fact, you didn't even need to tool new parts. Mattel had characters they would put out that were simply redecos of characters that existed, just with swapping around armor. Well, all of this was going to help the brand really grow in the toy aisle, and it really was the secret sauce that allowed Masters of the Universe to become the billion-dollar brand it was. Very little tooling, colorful characters, let a kid's imagination take over, and you basically have a winning formula. So much so that books have been written about it, movies have been made, and quite a few TV shows. Some huge hits, others not so much. But the basic premise of He-Man really lay in the structure of the main character, what's known as a form factor, the silhouette. It's become so synonymous with toys that the silhouette of He-Man can be recognized as a legitimate toy, whether used in advertising or even on Mattel's business cards. When I was there, I chose to use it as my token Mattel toy that would go on my card. So it's no surprise that recently companies like Funko have utilized the vintage He-Man body type to create new toy lines based on the man made of muscle, shall we say. A character in that haunched pose, legs bent, arms bent forward, ready to wrestle or combat. And Funko has used it for quite a few different toy lines, from Street Fighter to horror to even Thundercats, a toy line that was actually sort of a child of Masters of the Universe in a way. Well, it wasn't always like this, and Masters of the Universe as a form factor has an interesting story. Shortly after Masters of the Universe made it to retail, one of Mattel's competitors from the Garden State, Remco, best known as making those flashing Star Trek helmets that did Spock and Kirk in the 1960s, came out with their own toy line licensed from DC. It was for a brand called Warlord, which was popular in the mid-70s and early 80s. It's kind of waned since then, but it was created by famous DC comic creator Mike Grell, better known as the creator of Green Arrow. But Warlord was still one of his cooler creations, telling the story of a Vietnam-era pilot who discovered a world accessible through tunnels in the Antarctic in the center of the Earth. And yes, it was basically a complete ripoff of Edgar Rice Burroughs' At the Earth's Core, which led to the entire series of Pelixkidar, which was, adventure novels that didn't sell as well as Tarzan, but to get it to be read, Tarzan made his way there in one of his own adventures. Hey, world building, what can I say? So, while Warlord wasn't the biggest hit from DC, it fit the fantasy barbarian theme that Remco was looking for in order to compete with a line like Masters of the Universe. I happened to be introduced to Warlord from Justice League Unlimited, when several members go to Skataris, which is the name of Warlord's land in the center of the Earth, and have a cool adventure with him. So, the toys that came out in the early 80s that were licensed by DC for Warlord were odd in a lot of ways. One, because it wasn't a very popular character, and 2 because it had Mikola. Not to mention Machesti, who in the comics had a barbed hand. Demos was the main bad guy, and then other characters like Iraq and Hercules, well, they didn't even appear in the Warlord story, but they were DC characters and kind of fit the barbarian fantasy theme and got put into the line. So, the similarities between Warlord and He-Man led Mattel to file suit in 1983, claiming that the Warlord line was a direct infringement on their intellectual property and the design of He-Man's body that they owned, namely the overly muscular man built of muscles in a crouching pose in a fantasy action-adventure toy line. And, well, they lost. And then they appealed the case to a higher authority in federal court, again saying that Remco had directly ripped off their intellectual property and that the entire Warlord line was just Mattel's He-Man line repackaged. Remco shot back saying that the pose was not proprietary. It was a traditional wrestler pose or fighting pose that had been done in paintings and art for centuries. They also pointed out that it was a very Neanderthalic pose that showed primitive man in a fighting spirit. Mattel countered this argument with the fact that Remco put right on their package that the Warlord figures were directly compatible with other 5-inch toy lines, including Masters of the Universe, that they put right there on package. Well, in the end, the judgment was found that because Mattel filed right before the Christmas 1983 time period, that Remco, or rather Mattel, had not shown a balance of hardships. It's a legal term, but it essentially means that Mattel was still going to profit off Masters of the Universe. But if an injunction was put against Remco, it would hurt Remco more than Mattel would benefit. And that Mattel's timing of the lawsuit right before the holiday buying season was direct evidence of this. So, Mattel lost the case and Remco moved forward. Not only did they move forward, but they doubled down and tripled down with even more toy lines using the hunched-over, made-of-muscle body, including monsters, including dinosaurs, including wolfmen. They had play sets, they had vehicles. Once they were legally past the, the jury box, shall we say, the gloves came off, and tons of lines were produced using this form factor. And not just monsters, but things like pirates and, warrior beasts who are clearly not a ripoff of Skeletor. And in fact, the ultimate was that Remco actually got the Conan license and produced Conan action figures using this body type. It's ironic because for years, the He-Man line was thought of as being a ripoff of Conan, although that's been legally proven untrue and factually proven untrue years since, noting that the He-Man line was pitched as a barbarian, space, and military line, where Barbarian just sort of took the front seat, shall we say. The Conan connections were still there, and it's very ironic that Remco would go on to do an actual Conan line influenced by the bulky stance and hunched leg, hunched out-thrust arm look of the Warlord Remco line. And yeah, toys are not without a sense of irony. And Remco would go on to have a lot of success with their lines. While they never made it past 6 figures in the Warlord line, they're treasured by a lot of collectors today, not just because of the infamous lawsuit, but because they kind of look like bootleg Masters of the Universe toys. And of course, the final chapter in this story is that Mattel would go on to make their own Warlord figure in the Justice League Unlimited line based on his appearance in the single episode where Supergirl and Green Lantern visit Skitaris. And it's probably not without a sense of irony that a certain brand manager thought it would be kind of funny to put this figure in the line based on the fact that Mattel once tried really hard to shut down a toy line with this character and was now going to produce him on their own. Hey, what can I say? I have a very toy sense of humor. So, He-Man and Warlord, 2 figures forever tied in toy DNA. And, well, it's part of toy history, and it's worth remembering. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Warlord and He-Man connection, and do subscribe to this channel, leave a comment below, ring a bell, all that stuff. It helps tell YouTube to share it with more people. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.